Okay, so our next step is to figure out which of these two things the precipitate actually is, because it's only going to be one of them. Both of these compounds are going to be made when I put these two solutions together, but only one of them is actually the precipitate. So I have to figure out which one. Now, the most important rule that you need to understand here and keep track of is that when something is a precipitate, it will always be a precipitate. And if something is not a precipitate, it will never be one. So if I know that either of these things was a precipitate before, or if I know that either of these things was not a precipitate before, then I can simply use that argument to determine which one it is. Okay, so there are 3 different methods you can use to decide whether or not something's a precipitate. And this paper is in the classroom along with the assignment. Okay. Option 1 is that something is a precipitate because the other one was a stock solution. And stock solutions are the things I gave you. So the stock solution equals a given substance. So the easiest way to argue is to come back to the original paper here, and if either of the compounds that could have been formed are on these 3 lists, and it doesn't matter which list, they can be on any of the 3 of them. So even if we're talking about set 1 and I can find it over here in set 3, okay, it still was not a precipitate. None of these substances were cloudy. So none of these things are going to ever be precipitates. Okay, so if I can find barium sulfate or sodium nitrate on these lists, I can say that the other one is a precipitate because this one is on the list. Okay. The second option is to say that X was a previous precipitate, but you have to tell me the reaction. So right now this isn't going to work because this is the first one we're doing. But once I figure out which of these 2 things is the precipitate, I can, next time I see it, and you will see them over and over. We really only have about 5 different precipitates in this lab. Once I figure out which one it is, the next time I see it, and the next time I see it, and the next time I see it, I can simply say that, full disclosure here, barium sulfate, it's going to be our precipitate, that barium sulfate is the precipitate because it was a previous precipitate in the reaction between magnesium sulfate and sodium nitrate. And in this reason for choice box over here, you are literally going to write one of these 3 sentences, okay, with the X's and the Y's replaced with compounds, okay, and then the spaces, right, filled in as well. Okay, so the third argument is the one that I have to use here, and it says that X is the precipitate because Y was not formed in a reaction between. And we're going to find a pair of solutions that could have made one of my 2 options, but that didn't react. That's why we have all the pairs that don't do anything, because it lets us see situations where they don't form. So what I'm looking for here is a situation where I have either barium in one compound and sulfate in the other, okay, that would have gone together, okay, or sodium in one compound and nitrate in the other, and they have to be ones that do not react. You can't use one that did react because you could have been wrong that it wasn't the precipitate. So we're going to come down here, and if you get to about right here, okay, you'll see that I have a situation where I have sodium sulfate and magnesium nitrate. So I would have had sodium nitrate, right, and magnesium sulfate, but this doesn't react. Nothing formed here, which means that sodium nitrate is not a precipitate. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say this isn't it. Okay, it's the BaSO4. And if you're filling this out in a lab notebook, you're just going to circle that BaSO4 there. Okay, and I'm going to write over here, I'm going to fill in just like this sentence says, exactly this sentence, but you're going to replace your X's and Y's and fill in those spaces. So we're going to say BaSO4 is the precipitate. You can abbreviate precipitate as a PPT if you want, because NaNO3 was not formed in reactions, abbreviated RXN if you like, between, and again, we said the sodium sulfate and magnesium nitrate. When I put sodium sulfate and magnesium nitrate together, I didn't get a precipitate, so this can't be my precipitate, and it has to be that barium sulfate. But again, use the first two arguments first. Look for these things. Okay, the next time you see barium sulfate as an option, don't go through this whole hard process to find one where the other thing couldn't react. You would just say barium sulfate was a previous precipitate in the reaction between barium nitrate and magnesium sulfate. Okay? Best of luck to you.